So this is going to be my spoiler-free review of Secret Invasion, the latest installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and another one of those Marvel shows made straight for Disney+. As I mentioned, this is going to be pretty much spoiler-free, so I'm not going to be getting into any sort of major game-changing details that are going to alter your experience while watching this show. Now, as I mentioned, it's another Marvel show for Disney+, and we're well into the era of having lots of these shows for Disney+ from Marvel. There's been various degrees of success. Probably the weakest one so far was She-Hulk, the most recent one to come out. But even that one had its moments where it was entertaining and hit the mark on what it was trying to do. But the trailers for Secret Invasion definitely look promising and hope to be sort of another high point installment for the Marvel Cinematic Universe overall, whether it's movies or TV shows. The story sees Nick Fury basically taking on an entire Skrull invasion by himself, in terms of Skrulls infiltrating our society, pretending to be political figures and sort of trying to take over the Earth as they're sort of looking for a home that we saw at the end of Captain Marvel. Now, the tone would definitely be the element that stood out the most to me here with this show. With a few exceptions, most MCU properties or installments, whether it's the TV shows or the movies, have a relatively kind of lighthearted, fun, jokey kind of tone. Whether or not you consider that a good or bad thing is up to you. But with here, Secret Invasion keeps sort of a very toned down, mature, serious kind of tone. Very similar to what we saw in Captain America the Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, and the show The Falcon and the Winter Soldier from a couple years ago. What's amazing is that it's able to have this tone despite taking on a story that's about freaking alien shape-shifting invaders infiltrating our society. But it goes to show that you can sort of ground any kind of material, you just have to write it well, and the writing here is definitely very mature. As I mentioned, we're taking on the Skrulls in this film, and we first saw the Skrulls in the Captain Marvel film. Now, the Captain Marvel film surprisingly had a story that had us emphasized with the Skrulls by the end in terms of having them find a home and learning that the Skrulls aren't these sort of horrible monsters, at least not all of them, to the rest of the world. Now, this show definitely takes a different kind of approach, maybe a bit still nuanced in some aspects, but we see Skrulls as sort of very dangerous in terms of what they can do in terms of their shape-shifting abilities and infiltrating your society, to where there are a few Skrulls that's like, holy shit, if they get their way in terms of what these Skrulls can do, it's sort of game over for all of humanity in terms of the infiltration and the chaos they can create. And the only one that can stop that chaos is Nick Fury in this series. Now, in this series, Nick Fury is far from that invincible, head of S.H.I.E.L.D. that we saw him early on in those early MCU installments. But he's still a badass. He's still the Nick Fury that you want to see. But we definitely see him in a different life in terms of he's sort of a man on the run, sort of focused on his own mission, his own beliefs in terms of what he has to do to protect the world. You definitely still love Nick Fury in this. And we do get to see a different side, mainly in terms of his personal life, to see like, wow, it's kind of an interesting life that Nick Fury had for himself. But needless to say, Samuel L. Jackson is still great as Nick Fury and is continuing, and hopefully he continues to be great and we see more of him in the MCU going forward, however much longer that's going to be. Other prominent characters that we see in this is Talos. He's the main Skrull that we met in the Captain Marvel movie, and we saw him as a cameo at the end in Spider-Man Far From Home. This character didn't play as big a role, I guess, as the series went on that I thought he was going to do. But it was still fine, had his moments where he did contribute to the story a lot, and has some really great dialogue in his scenes with Nick Fury. We have his daughter in the series, though, Gia, played by Emilia Clarke, and it's fun to have her in the MCU now. This character was okay, I guess. This character doesn't really show a whole lot of emotion throughout the show, but I guess that's just the way the character was written. The character doesn't really have that big impact until the final episode, where she definitely has her holy shit kind of moment. That's going to be a game changer in the MCU in terms of the type of characters that we see going forward in terms of what they can do. Your main bad guy Skrull here is Gravik. The actor who plays him, I can't remember his name, but we just saw him in the Barbie movie as a Ken, which makes it kind of weird to watch this series a week later. But this guy was definitely an effective villain. You don't like him, but in a good way in terms of how you shouldn't like a bad guy, where he has his moments where like, wow, this guy is just an absolute dick. Even though he's, rightfully fighting for the cause of his race, the way he's going about it, treating his own people and obviously treating humanity, like, goddamn, this guy has got to be stopped at all costs. Probably my favorite character here was a character named Sonia Falsworth. She's sort of a British agent working, a human British agent working to sort of in the best interest of humanity in terms of protecting them against the Skrulls. This character just had some great interrogation scenes where she plays it so cold, so ruthless, but with a sense of humor to where every single scene she was in, the dialogue and everything about it, I thought was great. Now, this show was definitely bold. You know, early on in episode 1, I guess towards the end of episode 1, this show shows you how bold it can get, mainly when it comes to killing off characters. I mean, they kill off a character in the end of episode 1 to where like, oh, this character's not really gone. And then a few episodes later, you see that, wow, they really just did that. Very bold decisions, but that definitely adds a level of maturity and urgency towards like, wow, anything can happen at any time. And we see a few more moments like that throughout the show. Now, arguably the boldest thing this show does is with Rhodes, James Rhodes. Obviously, we've seen that character plenty of times throughout the MCU in various installments and whatnot. But this show definitely does some very bold things with him. As I mentioned, this is going to be spoiler free, so I ain't going to go into any sort of major details. But suffice to say that with the revelations that happen with this character in this series as things progress, it's all like, god damn, sort of makes you rethink his time in the MCU, at least up to a certain point, when certain reveals happen and whatnot. Towards like, wow, that's definitely very bold and in some ways a very sort of heartbreaking revelation right there. But it definitely makes me look forward to seeing his next appearance in the MCU, which is going to be the Secret War, Armor War show for Disney Plus. Just because it's like, I need to see this character and what he's going to do going forward. Because there's a lot of stuff in here to where it's like by the end, I wish we could have gotten more. But it teases you with just enough to where it's just like, wow, I just got to see what they're going to do with this character going forward. There's something that they do with Rhodes in the final episodes that's one of the best things you can do in storytelling, which is showing, not telling, not just directly spelling it out for you. And when you see the scene, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's one of those things where you put the pieces together and you have that realization like, holy shit, that's fucking dark, brilliant, scary, and awesome at the same time. Now, this isn't a very eventful show, mainly in terms of action. There's no like a ton of like major action set pieces or chases or anything like that. Most of these shows have had a decent amount of action, you know, like Hawkeye or Moon Knight or Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This show, not so much. It's really more focused on the dialogue, reveals, and various sort of espionage type sequences in terms of the sort of spy stuff and shenanigans that Nick Fury is known for. Probably my favorite scene overall, though, is one of those dialogue scenes which happens, and I believe to be in episode 2. It's a dinner conversation between Nick Fury and Rhodey, to where the dialogue, the writing, where that scene goes by the end, just sort of the gut punches that each one of them delivers. It's like, this might be the best written scene, just in terms of pure dialogue in any MCU installment at all, whether it's movies or TV shows. Just because the back and forth that was happening between these two, I was like, god damn, there was just so many moments, and by the end, you're like, wow, I want to see more writing like this, because it was truly spectacular stuff. Between that and what happened at the end of episode 1 showed that this show definitely was able to hit some sort of high point moments here and there, to where it definitely was being an impact and promised that sort of serious, mature tone, but still exciting stuff that those trailers promise. For whatever reason, though, it did feel like the show was missing something by the end. I'm not sure what it was. Whether it was an additional episode, because this series was only 6 episodes long, which is on the short end for some of these MCU shows. The actual climax is admittedly a little silly. You know, it definitely steers away from sort of that mature, serious, you know, grounded tone that the show was having throughout the 6 episodes that it did have. And what that does end up happening in the climax, again, no spoilers, but move over Captain Marvel, because you are no longer the most overpowered character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You know, we now have what is easily the most overpowered character now, to where by the end, it's like, god damn, the stuff that this character can do now, that's going to be something to where you don't even need the Avengers anymore. This character's got it all. But I still had a decent time with the show, mainly for its tone and the bold direct decisions that it did make. The shape-shifting nature of Skrulls lend themselves to do a lot of surprise, like holy shit kind of stuff. I mean, we saw a more sort of lighthearted version of that at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, where like, oh man, you crafty Skrulls, you got me again. But the stuff they do in this one definitely leaves more of an impact towards like, wow, some heartbreaking kind of stuff. So those are the kind of high point moments that this show was able to reach. So I would give 7.5 out of 10 scroll heads for Secret Invasion. Evidently, the viewership for this show hasn't been great. A lot of my friends at work who I know watch these shows kind of regularly. Some of them have told me like, yeah, I just haven't really been watching the show. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's just the fact that audiences, maybe there's too much of these MCU shows and they just decided, this one maybe I can skip out on. Maybe there's too much stuff to see in theaters. I'm not sure. I didn't think this was a great show overall, but I definitely think it's quality and definitely has its moments. And like I said, it sets up some stuff to where it's like, man, I want to see what's next for some of these characters. Is there the potential for a season 2? Well, I guess that depends on what exactly happens in sort of the next sort of installment for Nick Fury, which is going to be the Marvels coming out in a few months. As far as the stories focus on the Skrulls and what this series had going, I definitely wouldn't mind seeing a season 2. There's definitely more for them to work with when it comes to the story and what can happen going forward. And it ends in a way to where it's like, yeah, there's definitely more that you can do with this in terms of how the whole world is going to be affected by this whole Secret Invasion. So that'll do it for this review of Marvel's Secret Invasion. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching.